Hello and welcome to JSB Talks Digital, the podcast for marketers, digital transformation champions, and those of you bringing your skills into the digital age. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke and this podcast is brought to you by Digital Training Institute. In this episode, number 102, I bring you to Brussels where Mark Zuckerberg addressed MEPs and JSB was there to get the lowdown. Coming up in today's show, in social media news, swipe right because Facebook is the new Tinder. Facebook is testing an influencer marketing search engine, and Facebook removes 1.2 million fake Facebook accounts. I interview Manfred Weber, MEP and Chairperson of the EPP Group in the EU Parliament, about his reaction to Mark Zuckerberg's responses. In shoutouts, 3 takeaways from Zuck's appearance. Ask JSB. JSB's question is the first one asked of Mark Zuckerberg in the EU Parliament. In JSB's column, I give you my reaction and share my Facebook Live. And find out what social media tool saved my working week.
Social media news.
Swipe right because Facebook is the new Tinder. At the annual Facebook Developer Conference, the social network announced that it was entering the dating game. Ironically, Mark Zuckerberg declared that his intention was for building real long-term relationships and not just for hookups. Spotting an opportunity, Zuck said there are 200 million users on Facebook who list their relationship status as single. The feature will live inside the Facebook app, and Zuck says your friends won't see your profile. He also added that Facebook won't pair you with your existing friends. News that Facebook is testing an influencer marketing search engine got us all a little bit excited this week. Having just spoken on a panel about influencer marketing, I think Facebook are actually onto something. According to TechCrunch, the new tool would help match advertisers with social media creators. The branded content matching search engine lets marketers choose influencers based on characteristics of creators' fans and see stats about their audience. Facebook will initially focus on lifestyle creators, and brands and creators can opt in to participate in the test. Marketers then, on the other hand, can search for creators using specific audience demographics to target consumers based on several parameters, including location, interest, gender, education history, life events, relationship status, and more. According to TechCrunch, the search engine will produce lists of creators showing how their audience matches to a brand's. Influencer marketing, my friends, has just got a lot more interesting. Facebook has announced that it has disabled almost 1.3 billion fake accounts over the past 6 months. This is really great news for us avid Facebook users. It says it will begin publishing more data about how many posts it also takes down. Facebook disabled 583 million accounts in Q1 of 2018, and they say most of the accounts were disabled within minutes of registration. In a blog post, they say they don't catch all of the fake accounts, and the company is estimating that between 3 and 4% of its monthly active users are fake. Those numbers are quite big if we think that the Facebook population is about 2.5 billion. So when you see a story on Facebook, just ask yourself, is this true? Might it be fake? Might this be a fake account?
Interview.
In this episode, I interview German MEP Manfred Weber, who is also chairman of the EPP Group, the largest political grouping in the EU Parliament. Along with the attending media, I asked Mr. Weber for his reaction to Mark Zuckerberg's appearance in Brussels and whether he was convinced by his answers.
JSB Talks Digital.
Mr. Weber, apologies if you've already answered this question in German, but you were very clear in terms of Facebook perhaps having a monopoly presence. You mentioned WhatsApp and Instagram, top 3 channels. Do you think that Mr. Zuckerberg and Facebook fear the European institutions in terms of potential further regulation?
The European Union today is the level where data protection privacy has the highest guarantees, especially when it comes to the European data protection rules, which will come into force in a few days. That's why Zuckerberg respects Europe. He knows that we are tough when it comes about when it is about privacy. And the next step is about how the future world looks on the question of a monopoly of Facebook. Facebook is owning already Instagram, is owning already WhatsApp. And my simple question, are there competitors? Is there an alternative for European consumers when I want to be connected with my friends? He gave no answer on this. So it looks like that there could be a monopoly on the table, and then this European competition law, we have to act.
Shoutouts.
In this part of the show, I give shout-outs to brands, organisations or individuals whose work online is remarkable and worth talking about. In this episode, my shout-outs go to Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, and his top 3 takeaways from his address to MEPs in Brussels.
1.
The Clear History feature is meant to clear Facebook cookies, but also browsing history on Facebook. So, what you've clicked on, websites you've visited, and so on. This is very similar to what we already have in our browsers when we clear cookies. According to Mark Zuckerberg, this is a more comprehensive, clear operation, and this will include both information on actions users perform on the main Facebook platform, but also on other domains and apps where Facebook scripts, such as Facebook ads and analytics tools, are loaded. Zuck says, once we roll out this update, you'll be able to see information about the apps and websites you've interacted with, and you'll be able to clear this information from your account. You'll even be able to turn off having this information stored within your account.
2.
Facebook is now providing greater transparency on its advertising platform, particularly around political advertising. In beta in Ireland and Canada currently, users can see who's posted an ad, why you may have been targeted, and the other ads that the organisation is running. So if you're served an ad, or if you go to the page, you'll be able to click on it and see all of the ads that that particular advertiser is running at that very moment in your jurisdiction. What that is supposed to address is the issue of micro-targeting or so-called dark ads. People don't realise if they're being targeted or why they're being targeted by ads, and this is supposed to inform us and to empower us so we can switch off the micro-targeting.
3.
Asked about data protection, Mark Zuckerberg said they were 100% GDPR compliant. Facebook says data protection is central to Facebook companies, which include Facebook and Messenger, Instagram, Oculus, and WhatsApp. They say we comply with current EU data protection law, which includes GDPR. Our GDPR preparations were led by our Dublin-based data protection team and supported by the largest cross-functional team in Facebook's history. If you're really interested about Facebook and GDPR, you can read all about it at facebook.com/business/GDPR.
Ask JSB.
In this week's Ask JSB, I'm actually asking the question of Mark Zuckerberg. Yes, that's right. The first question asked of Mark was mine after the EPP Group invited fans on their Facebook page to submit their questions. So here it is being asked by Manfred Weber, the chairman of the EPP Group in the EU Parliament.
JSB Talks Digital.
Thank you. The first speaker is Manfred Weber, chair of the Group of the European People Party. You have the floor.
The first question is about when you recognized the scandal about Cambridge Analytica, you decided to stop the access of some of your business partners to the database of Facebook. You said this in your presentation also today. I want to ask you, why didn't you do it for all the business partners? So my first concrete question is Cambridge Analytica an isolated case, or would you say it's the top of the iceberg? So the concrete question is, can you guarantee to the Europeans that another scandal will not happen in 3, 6 or 9 months time?
Right, that's good. So there were a number of questions around whether Cambridge Analytica was the tip of the iceberg, or whether we expect there to be more apps that have misused data. On this, the good news with Cambridge Analytica is that the changes that we made back in 2014 would prevent a new app like Cambridge Analytica wasn't an app. It was an app developer who used the platform and then sold the data to Cambridge Analytica, which is a whole other thing. But it wouldn't be possible for an app developer to get access to that level of data since after our 2014 platform changes went into effect. But because there were a lot of different apps that were using the system before 2014 and before the changes went into effect in 2015, we think it's important now to go back and investigate every single app that had access to a large amount of people's personal data before we lock down the platform. So that's what we're in the process of doing. We've already investigated thousands of apps, and as I said earlier, we've taken down more than 200. There are many thousands more that we need to investigate. This is going to take many months. I do anticipate that there are going to be other apps that we find that we're going to want to take down. And this is why we're going now and doing this full investigation. This is part of our shift towards not just trying to manage the system reactively we've always had the ability for people in our community to flag apps that they thought were bad actors to us, and then we would look at them. We've had the ability to, and we've done audits of apps in the past. We've had a content review and app review team. But now what we're doing is taking a much more proactive approach. So rather than waiting for people in the community to flag for us that there may be issues, we are going through and investigating ourselves up front all the different apps that had access to a large amount of information. We are upfront reviewing every app that asks for access to additional people's information. And anywhere where we see any concerns, we're going to bring in third-party auditors to conduct a full audit to determine if there was any misuse of people's personal information. And if there was, we will ban those apps and tell everyone who is affected.
JSB Talks Digital.
So while Mark Zuckerberg didn't really answer the question in much detail, it was nice to know that I did have my question asked. Don't forget, if you have a burning social media or digital marketing question, simply click on digitaltraininginstitute.ie/askJSB and leave me a voicemail. You can, of course, send me your question via any of my social networks.
JSB's column.
In today's JSB's column, I give you my immediate reaction to Zuck in Brussels. Here's my Facebook Live broadcast after seeing Mark stroll past me just 1 foot away. Despite not getting a chance to interview him, perhaps I can always say that, well, I sort of really met him.
JSB Talks Digital.
Hello and welcome to the EU Parliament in Brussels. I've been here all day And what a coincidence that Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, has also been at the European Parliament today. So it's been about 45 minutes since he finished his session with MEPs, answering questions about privacy, data, and also Cambridge Analytica. So I'm going to brain dump and give you my initial reaction to what I think, how he performed, how our political leaders performed, and also what he said. Some big statements and some big news released today around Facebook. Also, interestingly, we are now going to get the exact same as that we have on web browsers, the clearing of cookies on Facebook. So if you don't want Facebook to remember any of your data, any of your activity, this is coming. We know that we can clear cookies and browser memory and data that's already been stored there on browsers, but that is now coming to Facebook. I guess the European leaders eagerly awaited Mr. Zuckerberg's arrival. There's been lots of conversations, high anticipation here in Brussels all day about what he might say. The format was very different as to what we saw in Congress a number of months ago. So what we saw today here in Brussels was a number of politicians, MEPs representing the different political groupings. So you had independents, you had SND, you had ALDE, you had the EPP Group, who are the largest political grouping here. And they all had 3 minutes to make their statements and to ask questions. Manfred Weber, who is the chairman of the EPP Group, he started proceedings and he asked 3 questions that actually were asked by citizens on the EPP Facebook page. And those questions were around, was Cambridge Analytica actually an isolated incident? Can you convince the citizens of the EU member states that there aren't other incidents of Cambridge Analytica that perhaps might come out? So Mark Zuckerberg said that right now they have removed third-party access to their API from tools that potentially were taking third-party data from individual users on Facebook. And they said that, you know, they'll try and guarantee that it won't happen again. There was also some conversations around the fact that Facebook is a monopoly in Europe. So if you remember, Mark Zuckerberg was asked by a congresswoman, her name escapes me right now, but he was asked by a congresswoman in the United States, who is your competitor in the US? And he couldn't answer. So Manfred Weber put it to him. He said, Mr. Zuckerberg, do you have any competitors in Europe? We all know that you own Instagram. We all know that you own WhatsApp. But we are a strong bunch of institutions that value competition law. And we know that the European institutions are very, very strong on competition law. So this was a very interesting approach by Manfred Weber. I also got the opportunity to interview Manfred Weber along with the other international journalists who were here in Brussels today for the arrival of Mr. Zuckerberg and his address. And I put that question to Manfred Weber: were you happy with the response from Mr. Zuckerberg? And he said he wasn't convinced at all. He said he respected and he welcomed him for coming to the institutions and addressing European citizens vis-a-vis the MEPs, but he said he wasn't convinced entirely. He did say that GDPR is the highest level of data protection right now in the world. And Mr. Zuckerberg said that he would indeed be complying with GDPR. So for all of those Facebook marketers and digital marketers out there who have asked this question thousands of times, because I've seen it in Facebook groups, in forums, and on my own news feed, Facebook are saying that they are absolutely going to comply with GDPR. Some other interesting things that came up, and the whole arena of fake news and protecting democracy. When it comes to election, Mark Zuckerberg admitted that they were very, very slow to the chase when it came to the infiltration by the Russians of the US elections. he admitted that they were slow to react and that they are now putting new procedures in place because there's a number of elections coming up. Obviously, we've got European elections next year, we've got elections in Brazil and also in other countries. And one of the things that they have already rolled out, and they're testing it here, well, I'm not in Ireland, but they're testing it in Ireland, and some of you may have seen it, is a transparency around advertising. So right now, if you are served an ad on Facebook in Ireland or in Canada, you will actually see who posted the ad, why you were targeted, and how much they are spending. So you can see that that is going to create greater accountability and transparency where politics and elections is concerned, and that can only be a good thing. Other things that came up were transparency, and again, Mr. Manfred Weber asked some pretty shrewd questions, I have to say. I know a lot of us digital marketing commentators were fairly underwhelmed when we watched the politicians in the United States question Mark Zuckerberg. We just felt that they didn't get or understand his business model or how Facebook operated. So Mr. Weber asked Mr. Zuckerberg, will you open up your algorithm? Will you open it up so we can have greater transparency about what your company is doing? Now, he didn't directly answer that question, but it's very interesting that Mr. Weber has put that out in the ether. So we had a huge media scrum when Mark came out. He didn't answer any questions. One journalist did shout at him and said, Mr. Zuckerberg, we want to know, how you're spending advertisers' money. We want more transparency. We want more accountability. But with his entourage around him, he just went straight out the door, and that was the last that we seen of him. He didn't engage with the media at all. It will be interesting to see if he has any reaction on his own Facebook profile, because we do know that he's quite active there. So that will be very, very interesting. Other takeaways from today, it was a very, very short session. Each of the politicians had 3 minutes, some went over, of course, as they normally do. But I think that took perhaps too much time and we didn't get enough answers from Mr. Zuckerberg. But I think it was a statement that Mark was making coming to Europe, trying to quell the fears among Europeans, but also among the very strong European institutions. Because if you think about it, Facebook have a very, very strong presence in Europe. Their European headquarters, their business headquarters of Europe are in Dublin, as we know. Most of their engineers are in London. They have data centers in Denmark. They also have one in Ireland. And so Europe is very important to them. It's very important to them. But we know that the European institutions are also very heavy on data protection, on competition law, and also on protecting data of citizens and also upholding the truth, because we've seen what's happened in America. And, many people on social media cannot decipher now between fact and fiction, and perhaps that's a symptom and a new problem that social media has brought. But there's definitely a responsibility on the social networks to stand up, and I think that the European politicians or MEPs here today were trying to get some of the answers. I think I have lots more digesting to do. I'm going to listen back to the Facebook Live, listen back to the audio of my interview with Manfred Weber, and I'd also love your feedback on what you thought of it. Was it very different to his appearance in Europe? I don't think he had a booster seat. That's one thing that I was looking for. I know he sat on a booster seat in the Congress. I think the chairs were a bit higher this time. Maybe they thought of that in advance of him coming along. But yeah, an interesting day. And of course, JSB Talks Digital always brings you the breaking news. I celebrated 100 podcasts on Friday. That was 2,500 hours of free digital and social media marketing content for you. So until next time, see you later.
Social media tool of the week.
The social media tool that saved my working week this week is Sweet Process. I love standard operating procedures, or SOPs. I even have one for this podcast. I follow a formula which cuts down the time to create it without impacting the quality of it. In business, we should try and create processes for repetitive tasks. But if you're not really good at writing SOP, then Sweet Process will be your best friend. I started using it this week to build up a series of processes that I have in my head, but that I really should be documenting somewhere else. So, why should you consider using it? Well, it will free up your time. Stop spending time on repetitive tasks. Get them documented and out of your head so someone else can do them. Then you're free to focus on growing your business. When a team member leaves, training their replacement is a breeze since all of their tasks have been documented and refined over time. It also reduces errors and redoing tasks. The procedures that you create are easy to follow. They're illustrated with screenshots, videos, and check boxes to make sure no steps are missed. You can get your 14-day free trial at sweetprocess.com. Thank you so much for tuning into episode number 102 of JSB Talks Digital. As always, I have everything discussed on today's show over on my award-winning blog at digitaltraining.ie. Thank you for continuing to listen and for getting in touch with questions. I love hearing from my listeners, so don't be a social media stranger. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You'll find us on iTunes and, of course, on Spotify. Tweet me your questions to @tweets by JSB. Post a comment on our Facebook page, Digital Training Institute, and you can always snap me to JSB Snap, and you'll find me on Instagram as JSB Grams. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke. This is JSB Talks Digital. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
JSB Talks Digital.